to Season 2, Episode 2 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slinsky.
And I'm Mike Bithell.
Each week we talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't find time to talk about because we are playing and or making games. Show note, thanks for all your downloads during the first year of the show, and everyone who's picked up our games, which make this show possible. Thank you.
Aw.
So what are you playing, Mike?
Nothing.
Oh,
yeah,
you're working. You're working hard.
I took 4 hours off today, and it feels like I've had a holiday. It's amazing. For reasons that will become apparent later down the road. Yeah, I've been very, very busy this week. Towards the tail end of this week as well, things got a bit crazy. So yeah, I'm just getting on. What are you playing?
I have been playing Ratchet and Clank.
Oh, the PS4, the movie tie-in.
Yes.
The tie into the movie, to the tie into the game, to the tie into the movie, to the tie into the movie.
Okay, so let's take a moment here. Because the movie is now available on Netflix.
Yes, I saw that.
And if you're a fan of Ratchet and Clank, I strongly encourage you not to watch the movie.
Really? You didn't like it?
It is bizarre playing the game, which is based on the movie, which is based on the game, and seeing the level of heart that's in the game, and then watching the movie and just never feeling any of it. Like, it never makes you feel anything, which I guess I'm just not used to from animated pictures nowadays. Like, I pretty much expect like every animated movie except for like a Cars or a Planes to give me some form of emotion, because the writing is so strong now in animated productions. So
they go more for the zany kind of Ice Age style thing, are they?
And that's the weird, yeah, and that's like, you know, the Minions, Secret Life of Pets type of thing. But even Secret Life of Pets, like, you know, it loses its way a bit here and there, but it's still an enjoyable production. I couldn't. Anyway, so if you're a fan of Ratchet & Clank, don't watch the movie. But the game is phenomenal. The game is a like a 90-something like Metacritic game, and it should be. Because it has all the action in there and all the love and just everything you expect from Ratchet and Clank is in there. So if you've never ever played a Ratchet and Clank before, A, I'm sorry, and B, this is the one. Like, this is where you should absolutely start.
It's so nicely done. The animation's the thing that stands out to me, just in terms of the amount of, like, I mean, they're using squash and stretch. They're using a lot of animation tricks that we kind of lost sight of game development, you know, stuff that was very popular in the PS2 era to kind of make stuff look better and higher frame rate than it actually was. That we kind of all got very excited about 60 FPS skeletal animation and don't use all that cool squash and stretch as much as.
Actually, take
should.
a nerdy moment to explain squash and stretch.
Squash and stretch is when you're animating, and anyone who ever has to do any animation get the Animator Survival Kit book, which is awesome. I think I've said that on this show before. Animation is a bunch of lies. When, you know, things don't actually move in animated films the way they do in real life, there's lots of ways you can make an animation expressive and give a sense of impact and weight. That has absolutely nothing to do with the actual physical properties of flesh and bone. Squash and stretch specifically refers to the idea that things like bouncing balls, when they hit the ground, they temporarily squash and then they stretch as they take off again. In animation, when you're watching an old Bugs Bunny cartoon, all the time there's squashing and stretching going on, even on little movements. It's the reason there's all those people freeze framing like Disney movies where like a face is just like warped weirdly. It's something that movie animation has done since the start. And in some games use squash and stretch amazingly. So in the specific case of Ratchet and Clank, it's having enemies who kind of scale weirdly as they move and as they rotate, and it just gives everything this kind of bouncy feel, this kind of very handcrafted animation feel. It's a very hard thing to do in games for lots of reasons, the primary one actually being memory, because the great thing about skeletal based animations, that's where you literally just have a character moving based on an underlying skeleton. that's a very small amount of data. You're just basically saving the rotation of every joint. Whereas if you start doing squash and stretch stuff, it can very quickly lead to enormous amounts of data that have to be saved and therefore stored in memory, which puts a lot of people off. There are tricks to that, though, and there's lots of very clever animators who are finding clever ways of hiding that data and kind of storing it efficiently. But it's nice to see, and Ratchet & Clank uses it amazingly.
Yeah, we got to get an animator on the show, because I think the last time we even had an animation sort of conversation was with the Zeboid folks when they
on
were
the show. Yeah.
Because we were talking about all the, the sort of Street Fighter 2 swiping tricks, like the blur effects that it used, which makes motion look better, even though it's, like you said, it's like a squash and stretch. It's a trick.
I mean, it's exactly what it is. That blur, that kind of effect is essentially what Ratchet & Clank's doing in real time with 3D meshes, which is really cool. Yeah, hopefully we'll have the opportunity. I think future projects we might have some animators involved again. Hopefully, it was great working with Aaron on Volume, so we'll see.
Then
and Tim was Tim on the show? Tim who did
No, I don't think we've had Tim on the show.
We should get Tim on the show. So Tim did the animation for Earthshape, which was actually much more in that kind of cartoony vein. It wasn't doing squash and stretch, but it was doing a lot of very nice animation. So he might be a good person to kind of...
I thought the Starseeker totally does squash and stretch when he gets out of the...
he wobbles.
The capsule. He wobbles.
We lie a bit. We create the illusion. So squash and stretch, in skeletal animation, you can absolutely... You're using the principles of squash and stretch. When someone lands and their legs bend slightly and then elongate, that's a squash and stretch. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean like warping the scale of joints and things. No, we didn't. So Tim animated it well, and yes, there is anticipation, squash and stretch, and secondary motion, and all those cool things. But we didn't quite push it to that kind of Looney Tunes for 2 frames. His legs are twice as long as they should be stuff, which is what makes Ratchet and Clank have that amazing animation feel.
The other thing that I've been playing is Battlefield, of course.
That's a big part of your life at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, now it's a couple nights a week with friends. And the thing is, I think that game I'm pretty sure they just recently announced that game has done exceptionally well. Because at this point...
But Alexander, I read all those articles at launch that said it was an absolute flop based on 1 week's worth of data in 2016. I'm shocked. I'm amazed.
It is. I believe that game has done exceptionally well.
It's almost like the world of game development is not 1995 anymore. Strange.
Yeah, no, it's a little weird. But yeah, I mean, at this point... When that game first came out, it's like 4 or 5 of my friends sort of showing up and squatting up, and then the past 2 to 3 weeks, I mean, our party is always full. Like, it is to the point where we actually have to divide up our squad into 2 different squads and coordinate. But yeah, no, Battlefield 1 is just, it's so good. And then the expansion is coming, which I'm looking forward to, and they're adding a ton of stuff. But I haven't committed to the season. I never committed to the season passes of any of these, and I think this may be the one where I finally commit to a season pass, because
wow,
it's the best Battlefield since Bad Company 2, like without a doubt. And yeah, they exceptional job by everyone involved in that, and I'm going to be playing it for quite some time. And now it's time for what's going on at the studio, and what's going on at the studio is Mr. Bithell spoke about his expectations for project management this week in a public forum.
That was a bit silly of me, wasn't
it? It was it was. I mean, a lot of people clearly agreed with you, and you did the right thing in that you pointed out. I'm sorry, that's not the way games are made, and that's kind of the point of this section this week. Is that there was. Essentially, there was an organization that was it was 15%, right? That was
yes, yeah.
Trying to get involved in the sort of early access chain that exists out there and trying to, correct, and I'm sure it was well-meaning to, make it better for consumers and developers, and for this service, and making sure that developers stayed on track and on task. They would obtain 15% of the revenue for that privilege. And what we're talking about here is essentially project management.
Yeah.
And the thing is that this acknowledged sort of a very linear concept of game development rather than the more holistic concept of game development. That
holistic's a lovely word for messy, isn't it?
It is. It's that weird thing where, it's the thing. It usually comes up a lot during our meetings where, especially in this day and age, there's this concept of, black and white, right and wrong, blah, 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 like, with us or against us. And that's not really the way business or development or anything in the real world works. It's percentages. There's a spectrum, and yes, you may have weighted sides of that spectrum, but there's a bunch of other things going on within there. So when we talk about project management, yes, the development of the game is certainly one part of the project the project, but there's also the accounting, there's also the legal, things we've talked about on this show. There is, as I so lovely once again experienced this week, the ratings boards and paying for.
You love ratings boards. There's nothing you love more. I can hear it in your voice when you're describing rating boards. You have a big grin on your face. You're happy. You just love the clean and easy way that they put their systems together.
And it's so clean, and no, it's not clean and easy at all. It's horrific. It's the type of thing that if a developer had to do it, they would get frustrated within an hour and be like, I'll come back to this tomorrow. And then get frustrated with the next day and then be like, I'll come back to it next month. And then suddenly they're trying to get their game out on one of the platforms, and then Sony or Microsoft turns around and is like, okay, we just need your rating certificates so that this team can do their check marks.
Dot your I's, cross your T's, yeah.
Right. And you'll be like, oh, I haven't done that yet. Can you do that for me? And be like, no, that's what you have to do. And then you get to joy. You get to have the joy of, oh, this is going to just turn into a ratings conversation now. Then you get to have the joy.
This is therapy is what this is right now. Yeah.
This was my week. Then you get to have the joy of, okay, so you've got something like Zero in Japan where you will need more help than you probably think you will on that. But then you'll have something like Peggy in Europe, where not only do you have to pay a couple $1,000s for the or a couple €1,000 for the privilege, you have to, take a course and fill out a form, and this is and even in that situation, like if you're porting it to, if you're porting a title to another platform or something like that, like you still have to pay for that certificate again. Now, it's at a reduced rate of what that previous certificate cost, but you still have to pay for it. And those are the sneaky things that sneak up on you. And then yes, but there is supposed to be a system that's either coming in place or is in place. I mean, we certainly saw it with when we did Earthshape, there was a universal sort of ratings system for mobile platforms.
Android, yeah, it's very easy on Android. There's very much a trust system, right, in place, basically, that you tell them what's in your game and they go, okay, until someone tells us otherwise, your game's this. Which,
right.
Honestly, I think for 95% of situations is probably good enough, right?
And that system is supposed to be coming to consoles, but for example, it's not. And so I just found out late yesterday that there's one particular country that apparently I will have to do the ratings board, and it's a governmental agency from beginning to end. And I apologize in advance. It's just not coming out in that country. I can't go through this anymore. No, I'll try to.
This makes you when you talk like this, it makes the whole act of like coding and designing video games sound much easier as a profession. You should get into game development. It's great.
Yeah, no. So
I've been trying to get my entire week has been about trying to get 10 extra frames a second. That's been
and mine's been about dealing with governmental organizations. But there's two of us, right? And
that's what's good. That's the balancing act that we've got, which I know, not everyone has. I remember I look back at Thomas and the first half of Volume's development before you joined, and just trying, like, it's like you say, you because they're not the fun jobs, you put them off. So you do end up putting off these kind of the what I would consider the very boring jobs. And that's not good for anyone. So definitely having someone on the team, or having a friend or a family member or someone who enjoys, or at least can do without pulling their hair out, the kind of job that Alexander
and all my
does.
hair is gone. So
I wasn't going to go there. I wasn't going to get those.
No. If you're already going to do it, I wasn't
doing it intentionally.
That's how I deal with the accounting and the legal and the ratings boards and all the rest of it. There's no hair left.
There's no hair left to give.
Like, that's it. We're good there.
Streamlined. That's what you are. Streamlined.
Yeah, like a dolphin. So the privilege of and that's the thing. If you've been provided capital money to produce a title, and you feel that it's I get nervous about this idea that consumers are being told it's that those lazy devs narrative, right? We're
as probably everyone listening to this can tell, we're not attacking these guys. I think it did come from a point of positivity, at least. It did until they replied to my blog post.
Well, you were asking questions. I mean, that's the issue. You were asking questions.
I was trying to be constructive, and I think honestly, I think that's probably where this project started as well. But yes, there is and I don't blame players for misunderstanding the way games are made, because I think an enormous part of that is our fault, the way we promote games. My go-to example of this is what's a beta? A beta to the player is a demo.
It's demo.
Now, that's not the reality in development. It's not the reality from a publisher's perspective. I've started seeing people refer to a consumer beta and a real beta, like in their terminology and their kind of scheduling. But that's not, if lazy developer is silly, I think also kind of stupid consumer who doesn't understand how the games industry works is a silly thing to say.
Oh, there's the quote for the box.
But that's a silly thing to say as well, right? Because we do need.
But see, I don't even do that. I go buyer beware. Like, if you are purchasing a product before it is done, the concept that should be across this entire narrative is buyer beware. It's why if Harebrained Schemes puts up a Kickstarter, I'm going to pay for that, because they have proven themselves. Because they have proven themselves time and time again, and this proof is, yes, it is a catch-22, but guess what? The beginning of your career is a catch-22 in a billion sort of ways.
It's a massive risk, but at the same time, it's not. I had a couple of developers message me after I put up that blog post, kind of, saying, well, publishers kind of suck too. Like, was basically the subtext of what they were saying. And I think there is a thing where, if you're seeing a game that's on early access or crowdfunding or something like that, then chances are, well, one of the big possible reasons that they're doing that is because they couldn't get a publisher on site. And the reason for that, there's many reasons for that, but a large part of that will be kind of publishers not believing that they can deliver, or, their due diligence not quite proving it. Doesn't mean that publishers think they're necessarily going to fail, but just that they saw too much risk to invest, hundreds of thousands of dollars, even millions of dollars into the project. If you go into a Kickstarter or an early access game, knowing that, you know, frankly, no one was willing to put that much of a risk on it, but you're willing to put a $30 risk or a $50 risk or a $20 risk on it, then fair enough. You know what I mean? Like, there's definitely, yeah, buyer beware, as you say, and also just, you know, it is a risk. There is a danger there. And crucially, it's not a risk that you can actually kind of solve. I think that's the other part of this is, so the idea of this company was to essentially take the money, act as a middleman, and then meter out that money to developers on milestones. Which, again, as we've been talking about, like, if you're not a developer, if you've never developed a video game, it sounds about right. You know, you pay people as they go along. That makes logical sense. But for the reasons I point out in the blog, that's just not how games financing actually realistically works, because you'll destroy the dev team very quickly. You know, it's not, and even a great, like, established dev team run by people who've shipped a number of games.
Take a moment here. Why would you destroy the dev team by
cash flow? Cash flow, which is more your area, so I think actually you should probably break that down.
Yeah, so cash flow is the monster we never talk about.
Well, because it's not sexy, right? It makes it sound bad almost. It's all about the money, right? That's how it sounds.
Yeah, it makes it sound like it's all about the money. It's probably the most businessy thing that happens in the industry. But you know, you may have heard it as, you know, referred to as burn rate, right? Which is, you know, this is how much it costs to keep a studio going. This is its burn rate. But what we're really talking about here is cash flow. And cash flow is, you know, starting with a certain amount of money and reducing that money as it goes along until that milestone where there's a cash infusion. Now, if you are most developers and you do not have other sources of income, that balance right there is the game, is the business, is the internal everything. So in this situation where there's this company who's, you know, holding a bag of money is yours, and they say, we're not going to give this to you until you pass this milestone. But in all possibility, and I have experienced it, you know, since handling operations and dealing with many developers, I've seen this time and time again, that certain things just take longer, or their project, you know, takes a different turn, or, you know, they're not solving a specific problem. And so it's going to take a few extra months, you know, past when they needed that cash injection to continue on.
I think the biggest aspect, kind of the softer side of this, is, and I think indies are to blame for this in terms of how we've talked about publishers. I think the kind of an average game player, you know, their perspective on this relationship between a publisher and developer is the developer makes the game, and every, you know, X number of months they go to the publisher with the game as it currently stands and go, hey guys, we've done all the things, can you give us money? And then the publisher looks at it and they have like a little checklist and they go tick, 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 tick. Okay, they've done all the things, give them the money. And then that cycle just repeats until the game comes out. And that's what I think this is based on. The reality, of course, is that you're actually talking to your publisher all the bloody time. So much so that, frankly, on bigger projects, there'll be one person on the staff whose entire job is to relationship manage, basically keep in touch with that publisher and keep chatting.
Often called the producer, but it can depend.
It can, yeah, and I mean,
can depend.
It's a sub producer almost, but yeah, there's anyway, the structure of that can change. But that's a very important job, and it's one that actually there's a lot of back and forth on. Yes, you agree on, you know, how the milestones are going to go, when they're going to start, how that's all going to be in place at the beginning. But as time goes on, you're chatting, you're discussing, you're working out that actually the game's changing, so maybe some of those requirements need to change with it. Or as you say, where you realize that one job's very big, so maybe you want to break that across a couple of milestones. There's a constant fluidity, and that's not about developers being terrible at time management or not being able to do their jobs. It's because you're not developing a piece of productivity software or a website. You're making without being massively pretentious, a work of art. You're making something creative, which means that sometimes you go down a road and you go, oh, well, that's not what this game's about. Or sometimes you discover something amazing mid-development and actually everyone agrees that you want to kind of go that through. It's much more of a partnership. It's not about it's not a bank manager. A publisher is not a bank manager. They are a collaborator. And if you with a great producer, a creative collaborator who is going to push things with you into a really cool place. And that's definitely, I mean, we just had this experience with Google. Our producer at Google's Kelly Santiago, who was on Journey. She was in lots of very awesome projects. So, me and her chatting every week on Skype about where the game's going was creatively leading the project as well. And we were tweaking what the game was as we went on based on those conversations. So, yeah, it's not as cut and dry as they seem to want it to be, or that they kind of assume that it is based on, as I said, the limited access to information about game development that is there for people who've not worked in it. I think that was another thing that really came across, and they kind of discussed themselves that they're not game developers, they've never worked in the space. So from that outside perspective, I can understand some of the assumptions they made. So it's a shame. I'm really hoping that they step away and kind of refine their ideas a little bit.
Yeah, so from a sort of developer perspective, if you're going down the early access route, I would strongly encourage doing a little bit of research, especially on the finances, because early access, I believe, I don't know if enough research has been done into this yet, but I believe it is a similar sort of structure of coming out with a game once it's done as well, where it is front loaded, where the cash that you receive is more on the front end, and then there's sort of a tail to it, so that you have to expect that project needs to be done closer to the end of that tail. And there are formulas which there's no standardization. This is the other thing.
There's no standardization, but also, to be honest, this is such a new way of selling stuff that there's the shape you described makes sense until you have something like an Arc, which just grows, or you have something like
or a Darkest Dungeon. I'm sure Darkest Dungeon probably has
it's all messy.
peaks.
You talk to some developers who say that their release out of early access is another big jump, but then you have others who don't see any change at all. It's an incredibly unknown field, and if you're a developer and this is like maybe your first game, or you've not released anything before, that's a very risky way to bring out your first game.
And then in terms of if you're a consumer, as in purchasing anything prior to it being out, buyer beware. That's really, from a consumer perspective, that's as simple as it gets. Buyer
Spend
beware.
your money, you take your chance. Yeah.
1, 2, 3. I wanna thank you for reading the freedom mail again. Thank you for reading the freedom mail again.
Hi, Mike and Alexander. Awesome to see the podcast make it to season 2. I've been enjoying the weekly podcast and insights into the industry and game making since day one. I had a question that you can cover whenever you find time. Oh, here we go.
We've always got time for you.
But I was wondering what your thoughts were on the Nintendo Switch as a platform and the idea of a hybrid device. Also, were there any games from the reveal that stood out to you? Mine would be ARMS and Snipper Clips. Personally, as a Nintendo fan, I'm excited about the potential it has, even though there is still some unknown features yet to be discussed, like online and virtual console. I might be in the minority on this, but I like that Nintendo is always experimenting with controls, always iterating and how we interact with games. Thanks again, Jack S. Also, Jack S., your last name, although I'm not going to say it on the show, is awesome. Awesome.
It's a mystery to me, but
it's good. It's going to be a mystery.
Okay.
But let's go back to ARMS in particular, because we did we were looking at doing a prototype that was similar to what ARMS ended up being. So yay on us for not going down that road.
Well, that prototype. So I think we talked a bit about it while I was working on a prototype. So if in a previous podcast. I was working on a prototype before Christmas. It was that we canned it because, well, not because of ARMS, but there was another game that was edging a similar direction. Yeah, ARMS is very much what we were.
ARMS is exactly what. The minute I saw ARMS, I was like, "That's exactly what we were gonna do." So yay! Didn't do that.
I mean, even down to like that art style, that kind
art
of
style,
like post Street Fighter. Yeah. Oh well. But that's good. Someone's making it, and I can't wait to play it.
No, I really want to play it because that was the game we talked about, and I'm really excited to play it now.
I'd rather play the Nintendo version of that game than the Bithell Games version, if I'm honest.
Me too.
Arsenal's good. I'll keep that prototype, and because it's a bit of a cliche amongst game designers. Every game designer has the story of, oh well, I came up with that game a year before anyone else did. I think every game designer has a story like that, and this is ours. There you go. Done.
I think this is also one of those great examples of why it's good to have relationships with producers at major companies and such, because when you come to them with your, really what you think is a really solid idea, and you're like, why
super original.
This is really original. It's not out there. Why aren't they interested in this? I don't understand. It's probably because there's another game.
or your prototype sucks. I mean, that's the other possibility. Yeah. But I'm excited for it. I want to play that. That one looks great.
And now what's Snipper Clips? Because I didn't notice that one.
So I don't know the full story. But to my knowledge, so Snipper Clips, I can't remember what it was called, but I played it at an event about 2 or 3 years ago. It was at Res, I think, or EGX. And it was an indie game. It was a cool little indie game. Lots of people gathered around it. One of the darlings of the show, as I remember. And I was really impressed. And yeah, I think from what I've heard, it was basically something that Nintendo were impressed by, and they decided to kind of bring it under their umbrella. So it basically you play as, I think you start each level as a shape, as like I think it's like a square or half a circle. I can't remember exactly. And then what you do, it's for maths nerds, it's Boolean the game. You basically overlap the shapes and cut out of each other. So if you want to make a triangle, you take your square, rotate your square a bit, move over so it overlaps with the other square, and hit the cut button, and you'll chop that edge off of the first character, and you have to kind of make your characters the right shapes to get into the exits, which is really fun. Really nice idea, really nice little indie game, and seeing that get the Nintendo level of polish is going to be really cool, because it was already very fun and creative and interesting, like I say, like 2 or 3 years ago. So I can't wait to see how it looks now. It's had even more love.
One day I would love to talk to someone who has found themselves in Nintendo's sunshine, because
what's that like? Yeah,
what's that like? Because it
could have been us if we'd shown them our prototype 2 years ago. No, that's no. It would be really cool. Well, what are your feelings about the Switch more generally?
I'm really excited about it. I was super down on the Wii U. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the point of it. I even had one gifted to me and sent it back to the store.
Oh wow, okay. Which
is, I mean, if you imagine, like, me, who will I grew up with a TI 99, then had a Sega Master System, never had a Nintendo, right? Like, I was that poor kid. But to get a Nintendo system, which I do have an affinity for, and just be like, I don't want this in my house, is a particular level. But I'm interested in the Switch. I'm looking forward to it. I'm curious about this having your friends come over with their Switch controllers, and then just like that, to me, for something like and just the possibilities of having individual screens too. Like, I mean, I would love another Crystal Chronicles, right? Like, there's opportunities in there for different types of gameplay that don't exist on other platforms, and that's what we sort of depend on Nintendo for. But yes, this is my first sort of Nintendo system I'm genuinely interested in since like the GameCube, and that's that's my sort of thing on it. I mean, I'm getting one. Mike Futter has pre-ordered like 5 of them because he's concerned about supply issues, because Nintendo doesn't have a history of
they've never messed that up before. No.
Yeah, they've never controlled supply. So, Futter's ordered like 5 of them. So he's just like, do you want one of these? And I was like, sure, I'll take one of those. So that spares me from having to, be at the midnight launch or any of that stuff.
Yeah. I'm into it. I've pre-ordered mine I just pre-ordered it on Amazon. We'll see what happens. But I did a lot of development for the Wii. I shipped a couple of games on that and was very into the Wii because that's what I was working on. That was kind of when I first entered the industry, was kind of the start of the Wii. I think I literally got my first job 6 months after the launch of the Wii, so I came in the Wii era, really. So you
used a lot of your Wii tricks for Earthshape. I did.
There's a lot of stuff with motion controls that was very useful on the Wii. Also, a lot of stuff in terms of the kind of the rendering side of things, because obviously, phones are awesome, but to get the most out of them, and especially to hit that 60 FPS, we had to do a few old Wii tricks. Rim lighting shaders for the win. So yeah, I love the Wii. The Wii U I got. I can't. There was a specific game I got it for and Kerry very much wanted to play it, but we don't really touch the Wii U, to be completely honest. It never really caught on in our house. But I am very excited about the Switch, because the main reason for me is the mobile side. For me, it's the Vita 2. And that's what excites me about it, is being able to, I do a lot of flying back and forth to America, being able to, I'm genuinely excited to play Skyrim on a plane. I think that's actually going to be really, really cool. So for me, I'm obviously looking forward to Zelda, and I'm actually intrigued to play Skyrim on it, because I missed Skyrim the first time. But yeah, ARMS and Snipper Clips, I'm super excited about as well.
The other, and I keep forgetting about the portability of it, because to me it's a console.
It's not, though, from a technical standpoint.
It's not, and I know it's not.
And I think that's actually the biggest risk they have, is people going into it expecting a home console level visual experience, and it's not. It's a really great mobile console that plugs into your telly.
But that also means that it might have those portable games that we're so used to the DS's having, like finally being on, because I would love to see a Pokemon finally, like a legit Pokemon on a console version Pokemon.
Oh, given the year the Pokemon IPs had, I think you're going to be seeing a lot of Pokemon games. I wouldn't worry about that. But
it's weird for me, because I'm one generation removed from Pokemon, the original. So I never really got into the portability aspect of it, and it's always just been on portable platforms. But I do enjoy them, but I would like to enjoy them on my couch on a big screen, and that's sort of my curiosity there. And then there's just several other sorts of titles that Nintendo has focused into the DS category that I would like to see veer towards the console space. And then, of course, I'm just going to play Smash Brothers whenever it comes along, because
I think it will someday.
If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@BithelGames.com. That's contact@BithelGames.com, through the YouTube comments of this show, or on Twitter by pinging @MikeBithell or @Slewinski. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platforms you're hearing this show on whenever possible. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Downen. We'll be back next week. I'm Alexander Slewinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word, Mike
Wagner.